Killer is dead.
Hello there, Seraphim17 once again. This is my Killer is Dead very hard difficulty video walkthrough. This is episode 6, The Man Who Stole Her Ears. And you know, one thing I really like about this game is the titles. I like how they utilize the moon as a topic for almost everything. It just seems to crop up in weird and wonderful ways. And the writing is not good in any way, so don't expect it to be, but I just like it how there's this constant theme throughout it all. It permeates the entire experience of this reference to the moon, even if, you know, the ultimate payoff and ending and conclusion is just, you know, baffling and strange. But I do like that. I think it's a cool feature. This level here is one of my favourites. It's a really fun one. It's got some good fights. It's got a decent length to it. And it's got a boss fight that is an enjoyable one up until perhaps the last form. The last form is very strange because it can glitch. And if it glitches, it's really easy. If it doesn't glitch, it can be a bit of a nightmare. But this level actually reminds me of Zone of the Ender's second runner. And it reminds me of the city where Sid is, because all the explosions in that place are tinted green, and everything in that area is kind of like a green hue to everything. It's a really nice visual design, and this place reminds me of that. But this guy is an upgraded wire. He's kind of unique in as much that he takes a lot more damage than the normal one, and he's got different attacks. And something you want to bear in mind is what happened just then, and it happens quite a lot just because of the hit detection on the enemy swing. I evaded the first hit, but the enemy continues to do a 3-hit combo, and the second hit of that particular combo is quite a wide horizontal swing, and he actually hit me with the end of the swing, so be very careful when you're behind enemies. The detection will still connect even if it doesn't look like it should have hit you, and it's just something to be aware of. But they're very easily dispatched when it's just one of them. And if they have a gun, I recommend doing an execution move. Because one of the frustrating parts of this game for me is when you come up against people with guns, they seem to just get hyper armor for no reason. And you'll be beating them up and they can still shoot you. You're not making them flinch at all. And I hate it when an enemy has a gun, has the ability to poise through my attacks and just beat me up for no reason when I'm beating him up. And then has a lot of life to top it off. And to use an example in this level, I believe it is, I killed a full room full of guys. You know, did it with style, did it with finesse, got some upgrade points, got some jewels, all that kind of good stuff. And then there was one guy blocking the exit with a gun. I went up to him, one guy on his own with a gun, started trying to beat him up, and I went from full life to dead from one guy. When I just beat up an entire room of the dudes, but none of them had a gun. And yet, the range enemies in games these days tend to be the weaker guys, but the annoying ones. That seems to be how this mechanic works. It's this paradigm that we've established that works. Not on this game. So I did that room again, and I had blood, and when I got to the guy with the gun, I ran at him and chopped him in half in one hit, and that was enough of him. And it taught me to respect the fact that there are certain design choices at play that can kind of screw you. So never underestimate anything and always remain on top of your game. But another interesting feature there as well, you get phone calls from the women that you're bedding, and they're generally asking you to come see them again, but it makes Mondo walk and it slows him down. So I don't know if they're disguising loading, which I don't think they are, because this game barely tries to hide its loading, and it loads a lot, you know. Which brings me back to my issue with the game's checkpoints, where they'll put a checkpoint before a cutscene, and then a load screen, and then the boss fight. You know, why did you not just put the checkpoint at the start of the boss fight, you know? No interest in the cutscene, seen plenty of loading screens, not helping me at all feel better about myself losing to your boss. Very strange. But this particular sequence, there's a lot of guys with guns, so I put my back against this piece of metal, and then I finish off the rest of the dudes. Once they're dead, you can then proceed to clip and shoot people if you want to, or you can just shoot them normally and evade. There's an ability called, I think, Evade Countershot, something like that. I don't own it at this point, but it would have been super useful if I did. So if you've got that skill, I recommend using it. And For this moment here, you don't have to go for the head, but I'm currently working my way towards an achievement to try and hit people in the face, so every little helps. And this might take a little longer than necessary because I am trying to get that headshot, so I appreciate your patience for this moment right here. But it's just reminded me I have DLC for this game that came day one inside the booklet, and I haven't downloaded the code to see what it is. I don't really have that high hopes of it, but even though I've said a lot of things that I disagree with and a lot of things that I believe should be tweaked and changed and polished and removed, there is a lot of fun to be had with this game. I think people who are already Suda51 fans are probably really going to enjoy it because they know they're not going to get a game that works 100% all the time. They know it's going to have moments in it that, defy logic and defy reason. And they know there's also going to be a lot of silliness that if you're that kind of sense of humour and you enjoy it, you're going to have a lot of fun. If you're not, you're probably going to think it's just misogynistic, stereotypical trash, which I suppose in some regards it is, but there's a charm to that kind of stuff because you don't see it so much, because nowadays there's, this, I'm not going to say political correctness gone mad, we just seem to have a lot more restrictions in how we can portray certain groups of people for fear of offending anything. And I'm not necessarily saying that's a bad thing or a good thing, it's just a thing. But this is Vivian, she's the assistant we've got. I think she's like a manager, and every so often she comes along and she grows a whole bunch of arms because she has this crazy 16 arm like tiger fist technique. It says it on a load screen, it never explains it in the game, but if you're looking for explanations in this game, you're looking in the wrong place. And you can completely avoid these enemies and let her shoot them. She will kill them, and it'll save you any trouble. Right there I got caught out by the kind of club-wielding standard wires, because what they do is when you beat them up a little bit, I think the weapon either breaks or they drop it, and then they start punching you, but the first punch is really strange because they do kind of a two-handed uppercut at the same time, and I never see it coming, so I always get slapped by it. But like, look how slow she talks. It's like, we get it, you've got big tits and you're being all voluptuous and seductive with your husky voice and your innuendo and all that good stuff. But I want to play and I want to skip your annoying voice. And I can't. And there's a challenge arena featuring that character where you do those missions that you pick up from her. And some of them are very hard. I'm talking really tough. Like masochistic at times when you try and do them. But the biggest problem is you have to listen to that bitch talk every single time you want to go and do some of them. And then when you fail, the loading screens and the unnecessary talking to get back in just to retry is something that, it puts you off wanting to do it. Like, when you've got a quick, minute challenge, you want the restart to be instantaneous. You don't want to be a barrier to entry that's enough time for you to decide to fuck it off and not do it. That's kind of the opposite of what those moments are supposed to be, but I'm just a random dude who plays games. I'm not a games designer. What do I know, I guess. And if you're wondering why the first attempt at an execution didn't work just then, it's because he was in midair. I mentioned on a previous video that it doesn't let you execute aerial enemies, so be very careful. But here is the target. I think his name is Victor. I could be wrong. I've beat this game twice, and there's times when I still don't really pay attention because it's so bloody batshit crazy. Oh, something worth mentioning as well, you might have noticed there's a distinct lack of environmental destruction. There seems to only be certain things that you can hit, attack and smash, which is a big shame, I think, but at the same time you learn what can and cannot be messed with. Right there, did not even see that dude, just completely flunked on him. And if you're wondering why I didn't hear him, I was watching programs while I recorded this guide. In fact, this mission might have been when my girlfriend was with me and we had an Al Pacino film on called Simone, which was about a director who gets some technology that allows him to have a digital actress perform a role, and she does it so well because the tech is so good that everybody gets obsessed with her, and it's pretty interesting. But back to what I was saying, there are certain things you can and can't blow up, and you need to be aware of which ones do, because if you're next to an explosion on this game, it does a ton of damage. You know, on very hard, the difficulty jump from hard is completely unnoticeable for most, but every so often you'll get hit by a move that insta-kills you, and you'll be just left wondering how it happened. And the funny thing is, when I did play through on hard, the boss of the train level, the train boss, he could one-shot you on hard with pretty high life. And it's all about the detection on how his attack lands. And because the attack seems to have a wide area of damage dealing, should we say, some kind of, you know, it's the hit detection on it. If he gets you flat on your hitbox, it can kill you because it's putting out so much damage. And then on other times when he lands, because it's not hit you nowhere near as flush, it does barely anything. But that inconsistency and those kind of design moments of why does this happen, what makes the game, you know, lesser than what it could be. And especially on that, because it's a strange boss, but I'll discuss it when we get there. So this little sequence here, there's a ton of wires on the middle area, and there's a bunch of guys going to shoot you. And the game introduces you to a completely redundant mechanic called crouching. And I know what you're thinking. The one thing this game was missing at this point is the ability to crouch and go into cover. Like, it's useful maybe twice in the whole game. For every other situation, it's just much easier to move and shoot so that you're a mobile target. Like, I can honestly say, out of the choice in the ability to crouch and go into cover and the ability to jump, I know which one I would have picked. Like, who knows, maybe he's got brittle bone syndrome and really weak ankles. Maybe it's super difficult to get shoes that fit his feet. I have no idea. What I do know is it's irritating and it just doesn't make a lot of sense. But this mission here, this is where the mission gets a little less fun, because all you're doing is turning this kind of catwalk and moving across an environment that looks extremely copy-pasted and similar. And not to say that it looks bad, because I think visually it still looks quite cool, but there's not a lot to find. There's no secret areas or anything. There's no, you know, like there's a feature where you break walls to find little caches, but I don't think they've utilised it enough in the game. So you go through spells where you literally don't find much, and that's a bit of a shame. Anybody wondering how you upgrade your life and your blood bar, it's not a case of finding the upgrades, it's a case of earning them. You can either buy them, or when you finish combos and you pick up roses, they will add towards leveling up those bars. And I believe those bars cap at level 99. Somewhere along those lines. And boom, you see that? Not worth it at all. Do not get close to the explosions. It's not worth it. They do too much damage. But they are super useful at breaking armor, which is something that you're going to need to do much later on in the game. But there's no real conventional way to heal yourself except for those abilities and the chance to get item drops from enemies when you kill them, or when you kill them with a combo and you can select what you get. And even then, they give you such a nominal reward that you never get your life back as much as you would like to. And that was something I didn't like with Castlevania that this game does as well. Whereas when you restart a checkpoint, it doesn't fill your life. And I think there's a lot of people who like the challenge of that. They like the fact it's the purest approach of, if you get to that area with high life, you're rewarded by having high life on the checkpoint. I don't agree. You know, you should never get stuck in an area because of your life. I just don't think that should exist anymore. You know, there are moments where it can definitely make you a better player, but the whole notion of a checkpoint is a retry. You know, if you were the player who does things perfectly, you wouldn't have needed the checkpoint. So I do think there has to be a line where it helps the person who didn't get through it without taking any damage. But it seems like in certain games, I'm not too sure why this game does it. There's a part of me that thinks it's designed, you know, the bad checkpoints. You know, 3 bosses in a row and no checkpoint, and checkpoints before cutscenes. I think a lot of this stuff is designed in such a way for the game to hark back to an older generation of game design. And if it is intentional, I'd slap that fucking Suda guy in the face. Because it's not fun. And we've got to the point now where games aren't just devices to steal money. You know, games are experiences, and I like to think the primary reason for playing them is for enjoyment. And obviously enjoyment is a subjective thing. Some people enjoy the sadomasochistic nonsense of not taking any damage and, you know, doing everything perfect, and it taking them hours upon hours of mastery and finally having that perfect run to show, and that's fine. But at the same time, there are a million more people, you know, 10 million more people who want to just get through the game and not be punished for that lack of perfection. So it's an interesting topic, actually, the discussion of game balancing and difficulty balancing, because it's something that some studios get really right and some studios get very wrong. And there's no right way to do it, guys. Every single piece of input anybody gives is valid, because it's something that isn't, you know, it's not a preset yet. It's not something that's been told. It's something that's constantly evolving. And there's a Scarlet in this box down here. You'll notice I use my blood before I open it up. You will also notice that these levels are a little bit longer than some of the earlier ones. From now on, the levels are going to be, give or take, about 20 minutes long, 20 to 30 minutes. Which can be difficult to commentate, but hopefully there'll be stuff in this worth saying, worth sharing with you. And one of the things I've not mentioned, which I really should have, is the Mika token, ticket, technique, or mechanic. Sorry, it's not a technique, really, per se, even though you do play in it a little bit. And it's a system taken directly out of Lollipop Chainsaw, where when you die, this might even be an explanation for why the checkpoints are so redundant, but when you die, you start every level with 3 tokens, and these tokens are spare lives. So if you choose to use one, you will be revived in that instant. Everything else will be the same. It saves the save state for when you went down, so everybody's life is back to what it was when you died. Everything is the same. You get up in the same spot and you continue with a full life bar. I made this game. I'm Suda51. No, I made this guide with the intentions of not using the Mika tokens, but there's a couple of checkpoints which, just to save time and save sanity and my hair, I just decided to use. And, you know, that's a personal thing. That's not a reflection on anybody else. They're there to be used, guys, and there's a lot of checkpoints in this game that are just shit. Just plain shit. You know, shit with a rose in it. A dignified shit. It's terrible. And there's no excuse. So, you get 3 retries before you have to restart a checkpoint. And if you're going to be using those tickets, it's probably going to make a lot of the encounters pretty simple. If you choose not to use them, it's going to introduce you to the concept of Grasshopper not making very good checkpoints. And I've played Grasshopper games before. My favourite is probably Shadows of the Damned. That was another game that had a lot of problems, but it also had a lot of good things. And unlike The Killer is Dead, that game does a lot more good than it does bad. And some of the worst parts of Shadows of the Damned are things that only rear their heads on the hardest difficulty, like the bosses taking a bazillion shots, which is never fun to do. And unfortunately, this game borrows some of those mechanics, i.e. the boss on level 4 or wherever it was, the stupid fucking clone ghost bitch. Absolutely hate that fight. But this here is one of the tougher fights on the game. It's not really tough compared to some of the stuff coming up later, but it's probably an introduction to, you know, managing a big guy with some little guys, which is not easy to do. And it's not easy because the enemies, for some reason, the smaller ones, don't move so fast. Like, normally in an action game of this type, you can just kite the big guy into a corner and then run to the other corner, and the little dudes will find you much quicker than he does, and it'll give you the time to dispatch them. However, Killer is Dead, it doesn't work so much that way. And a lot of the times the enemies will clip behind the bad guy, behind the big brutish dude. But the first thing I like to do is shoot the TV above to try and damage his armor and do some damage on him. He's got a lot of life though, guys. A lot of life, it must be said. But look at the damage those tellies do. So, comes in for the swing, do the evasion, catch him with some quick cuts and get the kill. I'm not too sure how many standard wires spawn on this bit, but I think they spawn indefinitely until you kill the big guy. So there's definitely a choice here of either going for the big guy first, or testing the spawn mechanic of the little dudes. It's entirely your call. A couple of things to bear in mind of this big bulky dude. He cannot be cut with the Executioner mode unless you've damaged him enough and the game tells you to do it. So don't even waste your juice, it's pointless. Another thing to bear in mind, he has 2 standard attacks. He does an overhead slam into the ground in front of him, and he does a horizontal swing and does like a half a circle in front of him. Both of these attacks have an interesting radius that you will think you've dodged it perfectly and you will still get hit. So sometimes, through my recommendation, I think it's easier to liberally dodge them, dodge them like a whale, fully get all the way out of their berth, than it is to try and get the counter on them. Obviously, if you've played the game quite a lot and you're really good with your timings and you've kind of learnt the enemy, you can be much more aggressive and much more risky and do the counters every time. I just personally found a lot of the times when I dodged them, even when it looked good to me, the game said no and I took damage, and situations like that can be quite annoying and frustrating because I hate getting hit by moves that don't hit me. That's one of the things I really dislike. One of the things that I wish they got better, And I understand that there's an area of influence on models, on geometry, in games, that we can't see, that's invisible, because it's being used for the programming to program things like collision, detection, all that kind of stuff. And every so often, a side effect of this is that it has just a little bit more phantom range than you think it does. And especially on something like an AoE, because if you design your AoEs, you've got to design a visual reference for how wide it is and what it looks like. And it can't just flash on for a second because our eyes can't process that, and we can't use it as a visual memory on how to dodge a move. We have to be given enough information to say, this is the area where danger is, this is the part that needs to be avoided, this is what I have to dodge. And that is a mechanic that a lot of games are guilty of, folks. Don't just take that as a criticism of this game. Dark Souls is one of the biggest for this. I mean, you see that then? That one hit me. That one I will take every single time. That is my error. That is my fault. But the one before it didn't hit me. Oh, just very strange. And I never professed to be, a fantastic gamer, a great gamer, a master gamer, or some of the comments that a lot of far too kind people leave. But when an attack misses, it'd be real nice if it wouldn't hit me. But this is the boss anyhow, guys. This boss has 2 attacks on this first phase. One is that one, the overhead that I just nearly got hit with, and the second one is a horizontal one. And you can counter them, you can block them, but this is one of those boss fights that because all you're doing is building your combo to hit him faster and do damage quickly, it doesn't matter if you miss your timings. As long as you get away from the attack, you can just keep on punching him, and it makes this fight pretty quick. And on hard, I got a really clean encounter. That is his 3rd and rarest attack. He does a spinning crazy move with an area of effect to it which can be countered, but is the most dangerous move of his to counter during this phase. When he starts blocking, you can charge your guard break if you want to. When you dodge away from him, you can feel free to shoot to keep your combo going. And right there, I make a silly mistake, and I get hit by the move that he does that lets us chop his arm off. So the second phase begins. He's got a pretty similar pattern. It's just it's a little bit quicker this time. So you want to be aware of that and try not to get caught. And I get caught a lot because I'm just... there's times when I play games really well, and then there are other times, like just then, where... And again, wow, he's got a running attack. So what this means is he's going to go and try and pick his arm back up. And if you do enough damage to him, you'll stun him. But be careful of that. He hit me twice, man. What am I doing? Just really sloppy. But he's stunned, so feel free to beat him up. And then you can get to the 3rd phase. But before that, he has to do the purple throw his arm move, so be aware of it, because I took damage the first time. I didn't anticipate it. Right, 3rd and final phase. And a little pause just then to see if I could skip this shit, but you can't. So you've got 2 minutes to finish this boss off, and he's going to wander around the stage. When he glows purple, he's going to do an AoE that hits the entire stage. To avoid it, you want to get behind the speakers, and then you want to shoot him and attack him and do what you can. Word to the wise here, when you attack him, he's moving away from you, so it makes it really difficult to rank damage up. And if he continues to walk away from you for the entire 2 minutes, it can be easier to fail this phase of the fight. But there is some kind of AI bug, and I don't know what provokes it, I don't know why it happens, but it does. He will stand still and let you shoot and beat him up, and then all he'll do is charge, and he just keeps charging that AoE, and he's doing it now. He's just completely frozen, doesn't move, doesn't know what to do, and then every so often starts charging his moves, so it makes this boss exceptionally simple on this last phase. Another tip as well, I was making the mistake of tapping the evade button in a direction to try and evade quickly. It's actually much better and registers better if you hold the B button. So a couple of those punches where I tried to back up twice and I dodged to the left or right and I ended up getting smacked would have been avoided if I'd held the button. And I just have to say as well, if you die at this phase, you will go back to the start of the fight. You'll have to do all 3 phases again. Unfortunately, the checkpoints, absolutely terrible. But thank you for watching, folks. I hope the guide helps. I hope you're enjoying it, and you take care now.